The title Working with People with Deaf-Blindness and Auslan Interpreters appears on screen. The title Overview appears on screen. A young woman in a black top appears on screen and begins to sign. And people signing appear on screen.
This video is aimed at service providers who may be working with a person with deaf-blindness who uses Auslan. The information covered in this video includes what is Auslan, what you can expect from an Auslan interpreter, finding and booking an Auslan interpreter, working with an Auslan interpreter, and payment.
The young woman fades off screen. The title Auslan appears on screen. The young woman appears on screen and begins to sign.
Auslan. Auslan is the first language of some Australians with deaf-blindness. Auslan is the sign language used by the Australian deaf community. There are some adaptations that are made when signing or relaying information to a person who is deaf-blind. These include close range signing, visual frame signing, tactile signing, deaf-blind fingerspelling, and chuchotage. See our video on deaf-blind communication methods for more information about these and other communication methods used by people with deaf-blindness in Australia.
The woman fades off screen. The title What Can You Expect from an Auslan Interpreter appears on screen. The woman appears on screen and begins to sign, and other people appear on screen signing.
Auslan interpreters are bilingual in Auslan and English, so they can facilitate communication between deaf and hearing people. They also need to have knowledge of social and cultural aspects of the deaf community and are required to follow a professional code of ethics that specifies appropriate behaviour when interpreting and assists interpreters to make decisions relating to their role, obligations, and rights. The Australian Sign Language Interpreters Association Code of Ethics emphasise the importance of confidentiality, accuracy, and impartiality. Qualified interpreters must remain impartial, confidential, professional, and truthful. Information communicated during an appointment where a qualified interpreter is present will remain confidential. Not all Auslan interpreters are skilled or experienced in working with people with deaf-blindness. It is the right of the deaf-blind consumer to choose any qualified interpreter they want to attend their appointment. People with deaf-blindness are not obliged to have an interpreter present that they are not comfortable with, and they can choose to say no to any interpreter they do not want.
The woman fades off screen, and the title Finding and Booking an Auslan Interpreter appears on screen. The woman appears on screen and begins to sign.
If you are not fluent to a high level in Auslan, a qualified Auslan interpreter who is accredited with the National Accreditation Authority for Translators and Interpreters, or NAATI, should always be booked for meetings, one-on-one or group, workshops, forums and conferences, one-on-one training sessions, or any time complex or large amounts of information need to be conveyed. People with deaf-blindness are all different and all have different communication needs and preferences. This needs to be considered when booking an Auslan interpreter. Questions to ask the person with deaf-blindness are: do you have a preferred booking agency, and if so, can you pass on the contact details? Do you have preferred interpreters? Do you have not preferred interpreters? And what communication method should I list in the booking? For example, close range, visual frame, or tactile. Some people with deaf-blindness will have preferences about interpreters and others may not. For organisations who provide Auslan interpreting services, see the Deafblind Information Australia website. When booking an Auslan interpreter, you will be asked for the person's name, date and time of the meeting, location of the meeting, and information about the content of what will be discussed. Once the interpreters are booked, it is good to let the person with deaf-blindness know who the interpreters will be. If you are going to be working with the person on an ongoing basis, for example for orientation and mobility training, or counselling, or therapy or training, it is ideal to book the same interpreters where possible. If the person requires tactile Auslan and the meeting will be more than 20 minutes, 2 interpreters must be booked. 2 interpreters must also be booked for large meetings, forums, or workshops. Deaf relay interpreters are often used for larger meetings or forums when multiple interpreter bookings need to be made to meet the needs of multiple people with deafblindness. Deaf relay interpreters will watch the platform interpreters, those standing at the front of the room, and relay the information to the person with deafblindness who cannot see the platform interpreter. The use of deaf relay interpreters varies a little from state to state. Discuss the nature of what will be discussed and what will be happening during the session to determine whether you need 1 or 2 interpreters if you are not sure. Allow additional time for the meeting. Due to having reduced vision, signing typically needs to be a little slower and more communication breakdowns occur. The interpreter will also often need to provide additional visual information, for example, the layout of the room and who is sitting where, so allow 1.5 to 2 times as long as you would for someone with a single sensory impairment. Also allow some additional time at the start of the meeting, as interpreters will typically arrive 15 to 30 minutes prior to the meeting to get more information about the meeting and meet with the people they will be interpreting for and help make sure the room is set up for best communication. It is important to note that there are some state differences in the terminology used for different communication methods and also in the process of booking interpreters. For example, in Adelaide, there is an expectation that deaf relay interpreters will be used for all bookings for people with deafblindness.
The woman fades off screen, and the title, Working with an Interpreter, appears on screen. The woman appears on screen and begins to sign.
To assist the interpreter to work to optimal capacity, please provide prior to the appointment any relevant information, such as relevant documents including meeting agendas and minutes of past meetings, subject matter to be discussed, names of those attending the meeting, copies of presentations and scripts of videos to be used, if the video is not subtitled, and a list of terminology, acronyms and abbreviations that will be used during the appointment. Interpreters may stop you during the meeting to request clarification. Aim to avoid metaphors or English idioms, for example, beat around the bush or dime a dozen. Be sure not to speak too fast and check with the interpreter that your rate of speech is okay. Also, ensure you maintain ongoing speech and do not stop and wait at the end of each sentence. For large meetings, forums or workshops, interpreters will spot every 15 to 20 minutes, and a communication break for 5 minutes should occur every hour to give people's attention, eyes and arms a rest, both participants and interpreters.
The woman fades off screen. The title, Payment, appears on screen. The woman appears on screen and begins to sign.
People with deafblindness who require Auslan interpreters and are under the age of 65 will have funding for Auslan interpreters in their NDIS plan. Do be sure to check that the person has sufficient interpreter funding remaining to book an interpreter. From November 2020, older Australians who are deaf, deafblind or hard of hearing and do not have access to interpreting services through the NDIS or My Aged Care can access free sign language interpreting services for daily activities. Bookings can be made via the Auslan Connections website or by calling 1300 010 877. For further information about deafblindness, see the Deafblind Information Australia website. For more information about Auslan interpreting, contact the Australian Sign Language Interpreters Association. Deafblind Information Australia, www.deafblindinformation.org.au, Australian Sign Language Interpreters Association, www.aslia.com.au.
The woman fades off screen, and an information slide appears on screen. Reading, Deafblind Information Australia, www.deafblindinformation.org.au. Australian Sign Language Interpreters Association, www.aslia.com.au.